Hey everybody, it's Jack with Future Pastimes, and this is Battle Language, where I have a discussion about something having to do with Dune with somebody. And today, my guest is Mr. Nobody, who is a Dune fan and one of our playtesters for Future Pastimes. And we're going to take a look at a homebrew faction that was posted by Gary on Board Game Geek. Um, and he is also recently become one of our playtesters, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we have a faction here that he posted. I don't know how this is supposed to be pronounced. Mikarrol, Mikarrol. I don't know. The mix that doesn't sound quite right. So this faction, which you can read if you're watching this video, and he posts a little bit about his where he got the inspiration. It was through a Dune source book. I think it might have to do like maybe RPG, or I'm not really sure. He told me about the book, and I went and I didn't have it, and I didn't actually even know about it. But I've recently purchased it. It hasn't arrived yet, but I look forward to flipping through that. But I thought it would be fun to look at this faction because he gave me a preview of it, looking for some last minute advice, and I think that he has also been running this on the Dune tabletop Discord to put it through its paces there. Um, and Mr. Nobody had also taken a look at it, and so I think there's something worth discussing here. So let's just kind of go through what it has on its sheet, and we'll dive into some of the other stuff as well here in a second. So this is one of those factions that starts totally off the planet, no presence on Arrakis. They're starting with 12 spice. So the sort of one of the barometers that we use is Atreides and Harkin, and they each start with 10 forces on the planet. They each start with 10 spice. So you're basically talking about a 20 spice setup. They didn't have to spend any spice to start with those 10 on the planet. So if you've got a faction here that's starting with just 12 spice, no forces on the planet, they're basically 8 spice behind. But they may be able to offset that. So let's dig in further. Two force revival, which is pretty standard for all the great houses. So that makes sense. They deal in slavery, so that's maybe a little controversial. I'd be looking forward to reading up where if that's true or if this is just in Gary's mind. And so slavers is his first advantage that he's given them. So at the end of any phase, they can send any number of their forces from their reserves to the tanks and then get spice 1 for 1. So this is a built-in income, but it's not without a separate cost, right? They only have the two force revival as their normal revival. Although again, as we get in further, we'll learn a little bit more about how they may be able to offset that. But this is potentially a nice way to have a little extra spice. What do you think about that idea of just your reserves? So you're starting with 20 forces in reserves. If you're just totally psycho at the end of the first phase, the storm has moved. You're like putting all 20 of them into the tanks, and I'm getting 20 spice. So now I've got 32 spice.
Yeah.
You're only going to get 3 out at the next revival at the most without the Tleilaxu in the game or having the Gola card. So that's maybe not
Sure.
an advisable strategy. But if you've got maybe you're in a game with factions where an early win is not necessarily likely on the horizon. You've got 5 other factions that can fight it out. Maybe it's worth it to you to say, I'm going to sit it out for a few rounds and just soak up having all this money, and I will outbid everybody. I'll get a nice hand of cards, and then we'll see who have. Maybe not all 20, maybe but maybe a huge chunk. I don't know. Is that crazy? Would it be insane?
I mean, I think it depends on how bad you need the spice. I mean, I can't imagine that it would be something you would do probably off the whim. I actually think the ability is really interesting because it changes your forces from just like boots on the ground threats to in a pinch, like you can send 6 guys into the tanks and get, collect 6 spice. And you know that within 3 turns, you're going to get, all 6 of those guys back, at no extra cost to you. Or, if you want to spend some spice, you can get them all back in 2 turns, but you're going to have to pay, spice for the extra guy. Um, I actually think it's pretty cool. Like it gives you more flexibility, I think, than it would seem on the surface because for example, if you look down and you're like, well, I'm going to send, maybe six forces down, maybe go after a big spice blow or something. And, you have a fight, you lose some guys, you only collect, maybe four spice out of the spice blow. And you're like, man, I really need to get some extra stuff. You can be like, you know what? I don't mind sending three or four extra forces to the tank to get you that extra spice. And it's also spice that you get to get where you don't necessarily have to either engage with another player or necessarily like give them money or trade favors in order to get this extra spice. So you're balancing like I almost look at it like a credit card. You're essentially getting funds now, but you're going to have to pay it back, later as far as like, the time it's going to take you to get the troops out. So I think there's some interesting applications you could probably do with this.
Yeah, and it really makes an alliance with the Tleilaxu themselves really interesting because then your revival rate, your free revival is the same, but then it's one spice per force. Because right now, if you're sacrificing a guy, you're getting one spice, but reviving that extra force beyond your free revival is going to cost double. So it's not really
Right.
economical that way.
Yeah.
But once you get that reduced to, all right, if I need to get more guys out, I can do that. And then the spice that I'm spending for it is going to my ally, so that makes it a really attractive alliance.
That's
I
true.
think I think every round, at a minimum, you're going to send two forces to the tanks because you're getting that free revival anyway. So that's again, two spice is not a lot, but it's better than one spice and it's better than no spice. So
That's
it's
true.
you're basically double your Chom charity if you were on Chom charity. So that's pretty good. So let's pop down because this next advantage is pretty interesting companion. So it's called replenishment. So it's after you resolve a battle that had a winner. So it's basically any battle that you're in other than like a laser gun shield explosion. There's no winner in that battle. So you may immediately revive up to two of your forces from the tanks for free. And if you won the battle, you can instead revive up to four forces for free. So getting into fights is another way to maybe balance that out. Even if you are like, I'm sending one guy into a battle, I'm going to get two out just by throwing that fight, just by basically going on a suicide mission. So that's not. And if you end up, if you're like, all right, this is a little bit more considered, I'm going in. Maybe I've got some good cards. I've spent my money on some good cards. We'll take a look at the leaders here. They're couple of them are pretty decent. So maybe you're winning a fight, you're not having to dial that high, and now you're getting four forces out, and so that can be a really nice element to kind of mitigate those losses from having to send your reserves to the tanks. So I like this as a 1-2 punch. It really lets you throw away your forces. Basically your guys are just cannon fodder for whatever. I don't know. I guess the idea with it's slaves and it's slave labor and their sacrifice, but I don't know. I might have characterized it slightly differently, but in any case, it's pretty effective. How do you feel about this replenishment as an advantage?
I think it's really cool. It almost feels like the inverse of the Talaxu, where the Talaxu kind of want to have all of the other factions in the tanks so that they can be getting that drip economy and then, giving them larger revivals. This is kind of cool because it's very insular, where you are, like, for example, you could technically send six guys to the tank, go down, fight guys, and if you win, you get four back immediately, and then you also get two back from free revival. So outside of the cost of you shipping and potentially having a spice style, you essentially get to make six extra spice, and you get all of those guys back for nothing, kind of thing. Or at the bare minimum, even if you send those guys in there, even if you lose, you're still going to get a third of those guys back out, and then you still get your two free revival. So you get, 66% of those guys out, and then you still got two guys in there anyway, which you're going to get for free revival. So I really like this idea that it's leaning into manipulating, your reserve slash forces to the tank to both like be a resource of not only what you're sending there to get spice, but what you get to collect out of as a reward for getting into battles. And I really think it incentivizes a lot of action on the table, which I'm always a fan of.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. It gives you a reason to do this. You just got to worry about the leaders. But if you're somebody who has picked up a cheap hero treachery card, you're like, great. I'm at a minimum. I'm sending one force in to fight this fight because I'm going to end up getting somebody out of the tanks. You lose one, but you get back two. That's pretty good. So it increases that what's normally a trickle in trying to get forces out of the tanks when you take a big hit. All right, let's move on. I'm going to skip the alliance thing here. Let's finish out with just all of their advantages. They've got one advanced game advantage called Raiders. So here it is. During the battle phase, you do not have a limit on the number of treachery cards you can hold in your hand. After resolving a battle that you won, you may steal a random treachery card from the loser's hand. And after you look at the stolen treachery card, you can add it to your hand or discard it. The treachery card is stolen after resolving the Moritani Alliance ability or Nexus card effect. And at the end of the battle phase, if the number of your treachery cards exceeds your normal hand limit, you must discard down to your normal hand limit. So this is something that is encouraging this faction to get into multiple battles, especially if they've got a couple of really good cards. They get into a battle with somebody, maybe the Harkonnen, maybe the Emperor, who's probably going to have a full hand and may have some good cards to take. It may let you upgrade something from your hand. And then when you get down to the end of the phase, you can say, all right, well, maybe I don't care about weather control, so I'm going to ditch that because I took poison from somebody. So this is an interesting effect. And what I really like it is it's a very elegant idea of taking a card from somebody, which we don't really have as an effect. And it's kind of I don't know, like a board game industry standard sort of effect for any kind of game that has a lot of effects like this at hands of cards. The closest thing we have is there's a Moritani effect that lets you're not stealing a card, you're just eliminating a card from somebody's hand at random. And then, of course, you can also replace it with garbage from your hand. So that is its own nice little effect, but this is definitely distinctly different, and I like that. And I like that it's not necessarily abusive because they do ultimately have to go down. And it does, it's got this clarification about the Moritani, not just the alliance ability, but if you're allied with the Moritani after they have used their atomics token, you have a hand limit of three. And so this might be your normal hand limit. This will certainly be misinterpreted. So you're like, hey,
Yeah.
great, I get to go to my normal hand limit is four, and so there may be some clarification there is necessary, or your current hand limit, I guess maybe is. There's not a lot of other effects that change your hand limit. There's only, in fact, the only one I can think of. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that Moritani Alliance thing for being allied with somebody who has flaunted the Great Convention. So yeah, stealing a card. I mean, it's very straightforward. I love this. I mean, but what do you think? It's certainly nasty. It's making this is a very in the whole scheme of things. You've got the Harkonnen, who are pretty evil, the Moritani, who are very nasty, the Tililaxu, who are considered filthy and awful, and now you've got another little friend for their club of the bad guys,
Yeah.
who with their raiders.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is out of all their abilities, this one is probably going to be the most contested. I would imagine by a lot of people who play them. I can see why people wouldn't like it, but it only triggers in a specific condition, and on top of that, most of the time, most battles you're only really going to fight like one or two. So at most, on average, you're only going to be stealing like one or two cards, and then you have to decide like at the end of everything, like what you want to keep and what you basically want to discard. Where I could see it might become a problem is if they get like Shield Snooper Poison Blade, and they also happen to get like I don't know, maybe the lays gun, or they know that maybe their ally, if their ally with somebody has, poison tooth or artillery strike, so they don't have to worry about that. And they got a couple safe leaders. They could kind of go around and terrorize, and be like,
Yeah, but
well,
here's
I'm
the
just
thing. I
gonna.
mean, if they're getting into a battle with somebody who has either the poison blade or the shield snooper, first of all, they have to have not had it in their battle plan.
Sure, sure, sure.
And then they'd have to lose. So if you've lost a battle with the shield snooper or the poison blade, then you deserve what you get. And so, and in fact, if
No
you say, "Oh,
mercy.
I'm getting into a battle with this faction that I know can steal cards from me, and I'm not going to use that card," I think that again, you're getting what you deserve. And I like that this is in some ways similar to how the Harkonnen have the captured leader, which they can maybe use as a way to intimidate people to say like, look, throw this
Sure.
fight, and I won't capture a leader.
Yeah.
They can go in hot with a lot of forces, and they can say, yeah, I've got a full hand, or I've got three cards, and a couple of them are quite good. I'm going to, if you don't win this battle, you're going to lose something from your hand. And
Yeah.
if you have good reason to think that they've got three or more good cards, they can only protect two of them if they're in their battle plan. And
Right.
so I like that. So I'm not too worried about it being overly abused. I think that the stars really have to align, and somebody else has to have made quite a few mistakes or miscalculations for this to just
I would say
completely
that.
blow up in their face.
Yeah, I would say the most obvious, probably abusable spot would be if they ally with the Bene Gesserit and they forbid you from playing a card and assuming you have that card. So, like, for example, if they have a poison weapon and they say, like, you can't play a snooper, and the battle plans get revealed. It's like, oh, look, I win. Okay, like, let me steal a card from you, and then they end up pulling those cards that they didn't let you play in the first place, kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's kind of like the only immediate thing that kind of comes to mind. But we have some other nasty effects and nasty combinations with the Bene Gesserit and some other factions. So
it's
in
true.
the grand scheme of things, it's probably
So this is
tame
another
compared to some of
nice
those.
little
So
power alliance here. If the Tleilaxu are not your go-to ally as Mikarrol, definitely want to get the sisterhood in there because you can really shake things up on the battlefield there by using the voice and then hoping to plunder the very thing that you have forbidden the players to use. All right, so we're looking at their once per game Karama effect. Play any time. You may say any number of liters that you currently control to the tanks and collect spice equal to their total strength. So, again, if we're looking, they've got 2, 3, 3, 5, and 6. And so that's can be painful. You don't want to lose a lot of your leaders. And if you're tossing a couple of your low ones, you're only getting 5 spice or maybe 6 spice. And so it's a kind of a desperate act, but I think in light of the synergy they've got going on with their other three advantages, I'm okay with this one not being as sexy as like the Atreides or the Harkonnens once per game Karama effect. Um, and so, because yeah, the Slavers Replenishment and Raiders, these are all things that it's not like, oh, I'm only going to get to use this maybe once in a game. You could potentially be using these fairly frequently, and
right,
so that that kind of ratio of getting a lot of usage out of my three primary advantages here. So this once per game thing doesn't have to do so much heavy lifting. So I think
right.
I'm okay with that, and it's kind of related to their slavers thing there, so it doesn't feel like it's completely in left field as well. Which sometimes you're like, what is this? What is this effect that's just been thrown in there? Which I'm as guilty of as anybody else. So I'm okay with that one. And, it's not going to happen most games at all. And even if you've got a Kurama card as this faction, you may not feel like you need to. You're like, oh, you know what, I might be better off just using that card for the shipping, which hardly anyone does. More likely for the
Sure.
free card, or stopping the voice, stopping prescience, stopping some other thing is usually what that Kurama. Most of the time,
Right, right.
you're like, you know what? I know I can do this one crazy thing, but right now, what I need it for is this. That's a be fun though if you've used your Raiders effect to take a Karama from somebody, and you're like, oh, great, well, that's good to know,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's a card that
To
can't
me,
go into a battle plan, so it's a juicy one to potentially get from somebody else. Although you
right. Yeah.
maybe they play the Karama on you to say you're not taking it, but at the same time, I guess it's better. It's better to waste that Karama to stop them from taking a card from you than just losing it to them and then they've got a Karama. So yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would say like if I was that player, the only time that I would really consider using this is if like me and my ally are going for a win and I've sussed out like, maybe
yeah.
two of my leaders. You might want to use it to just like kill the rest of them, get all that spice, send whatever extra forces you're not necessarily going to use, in these battles to the tank. Just basically make yourself super spice rich and just swing for the fences.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's all you need is 5 or 6 spice to really be able to send enough forces down or be able to dial enough. And so that's what you're waiting for. And knowing that if I've got the Karama, I can do this anytime I need to get that extra spice and say, yeah, as long as I'm not in 4 battles, if I'm only going to be in 2 battles, then I've got up to 3 expendable leaders here that might give me all the spice that I need. Especially if you have reason to suspect, to like maybe your 5 strength leader is like, I don't trust that this guy is safe, so
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's Guinevere here. I'm gonna send her to the tanks and just get 5 spice for her. All right, let's look at the alliance ability. So if you're allied with this faction, at the end of any phase, your ally may send any number of their forces from the reserves to get spice. So that's pretty straightforward, simple, and I think again elegant. It's giving them the slavers effect, and it's to their benefit. So, and again, if you're allied with the Tleilaxu, for example, where they're like whatever, so it's much cheaper for me to get them, and I can get them all out if I want to. They're not gonna, they get their income, and so that will maybe pay for the number of forces that they have previously sent. So, like right before revival, I'm going to send 12 of my Tleilaxu to the tanks for 12 spice, and then I'm going to get 5 or 6 spice in income. So I'll just spend that to get 5 or 6 guys back out. So that would be pretty
Sure.
good there. Same thing with Chom. They only cost them 1, and they have no limits on their revival as well. So, and with their income, they might say, yeah, this is great because I'm going to get Chom Charity next phase. So if I need to revive, but being able to say, yeah, we only need out of my 20 forces, I've got like 12 in reserves. I'm only going to need like 6 of them. So yeah, I'm going to dump 6
I
of them
also
right now.
I also quite like it with the Fremen, especially if you're playing with Homeworlds, because you can send a Fedaykin and then X
Yeah,
amount of other guys to the tanks, and now all of a sudden it's like even if you didn't get spice blow and you didn't buy a card, it's like going from 3 spice to 10 spice or 8 spice or whatever. That makes a big deal in their swing, and then whenever they revive the Fedaykin, they can just put it into a different stack. Like
yeah,
it's a little subtle thing, but I really feel like and speaking of the Fremen, the fact that they would give them 3 free revivals on top of their combat advantages with fighting and stuff. It's like they could send 5 guys to the tanks, get 3 of them back, ship a guy down, even if they threw the fight, and then still get the 2 extra guys out. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I feel like the Freeman in them could be I don't know, they might could do a little something.
Yeah, I think that is a nice little bit of incentive there. So we got the alliance card, which we just talked about. That this is a Karama reference that is in the style of my Karama reference card. So a bully for me. A nice Vena Gesture prediction card. Did a good job with these. The shield looks nice. I'm curious where got the portraits done. It's not the normal assortment of homebrew guys who keep showing up over and over again. So that's kind of fun. Somebody commented that their colors here are a little too close to Chom. Chom's half red, half black. Here we have half orange, half black. We got that same sort of orange and red issue that we have currently in the current edition of the game with the Emperor and the Guild. They're like, it's a little too close. I do like this faction symbol. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure what it is. Kind kind of looks like a battleship coming at me, or some mailed gauntlets folded together. I don't know. Let's take a look at the home world. So we've got Kublai 12 is their home world. So their high threshold, as long as they have 7 or more of their forces in reserve. So they're going to want to be careful occasionally about how many slaves they're sending to the pits for parts. When you revive forces with your replenishment advantage after winning a battle, you may revive an additional force for free. So it's not super powerful, but they're getting either 3 or 5 out. So that's a nice little perk. When they dip down to low threshold, you may not benefit from your replenishment advantage after resolving a battle on a home world. So that's not a terrible disadvantage. They occupied effect 2 spice for the occupier, and the occupier and their ally may revive an additional 2 forces for free in addition to whatever they would otherwise revive normally during the revival phase. And this will need an asterisk or a whatever to account for. If I normally have 2 free revival, do I get 4 free, or am I still limited to 3 in a game without the Tleilaxu? That would be a question that I would have to see. So this is an interesting home rule. It's not super powerful, but I think that's okay. I don't feel any need for the home worlds to all feel like they're so utterly balanced. You got to take into account the faction abilities as well, and what the synergy there is, and you're comparing it as more holistically with the other homeworlds and faction combinations. So, like the Atreides, they got some powerful faction abilities. Their homeworld ability is not super powerful, but it's decent. It's a decent effect, and their penalty on for Caladan is they don't get to do their movement advantage, which is looking at the spice card, which a lot of players forget to do. So it's Mike made it formal. So it's not that big of a deal. So I'm okay with Kublai 12 as a homeworld effect. I think it makes a certain amount of sense, and it's pretty manageable. I'm looking at these numbers, 7 and 12. I don't know. I might have made their high threshold even bigger, so maybe 6 to 20, just because they are going to be sending forces from reserves to the tanks as part of their slaver's advantage. But that's just one number there. So I don't know. What do you say, nobody? What do you think about Kublai?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was probably he would be, it feels like he was trying to be a little more modest, maybe with like the estimations of how impactful the homeworlds or this particular homeworld was, because sending guys to the tanks, reviving them out, and then getting the extra revival when you're fighting in combat. I think he was just like he didn't want to make it to where like, oh, it's this low and you can just send all these guys to the tanks and then you're gonna have all this money. So I don't know. One can make a difference. It's like if you look at Salusa Secundus, with the Sardaukar advantage and the disadvantage, it's
Yeah.
like once you get to that low threshold, then you get back up. It's like, well, you actually need to do one more to be considered high, and it's like that can be the difference, in some games. Although maybe in a smaller way, especially maybe if you're spice starved or something. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looks clean, it looks good. I like that the occupy advantage is what it is, because it kind of incentivizes you to really go after that homeworld in particular. The same way with what was it, Wallach 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like being able to jump on that and being like, no, 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 you don't get to tell me what to do. Like that can be a really, really powerful thing. Or the same thing with Talaxu. It's like, if you make it to where you and your ally can't be face dance. So I like it when the homeworlds have a really powerful negative effect if they're occupied. It really gives you incentive to go after it when you may, normally may not. You may just look at it and be like, they're not really getting that much bonus from it. Like, I don't really care. And then you like read the bottom and you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
maybe I should go there.
And 2 spice is pretty good, and they only get the +2 in battles there. So if they've got, if they've revived and they've got 2 forces there, um, it's going to be hard for them to fight off occupiers. Whereas their high threshold. Nobody is going to Kublai 12 while they're at high threshold. They're going to have at least 7 forces there. They get a +3 to their dial, and the effect is not strong enough to want to take it away from them. So I think
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that I think that works out pretty well. I'll be interested to hear from Gary how much playtesting he did with this homeworld, if any. It's easy to imagine they were like, that's fine. We don't need to test that out too much. What's
Sure.
interesting is that I would come up with some numbers just based on my gut. I'd say like, yeah, you know what, this is what it's going to be for junction or for two pile or whatever, and then we would play with the homeworlds a couple of times, and in just about every case I was like, I need to adjust these numbers. This number's too high or this number's too low. And a couple of games, and it really lets one game usually isn't enough, just because there's so many weird things that can happen in a game of Dune. You're just like, well, that was
That's
weird.
true.
This doesn't feel like the sort of thing that would happen very often, so I don't know how much we can count on that data. But yeah, so it's interesting, and again, I'm sure that we'll hear from Gary at some point, and we'll see maybe in the comments. Let's look at the Nexus card here. So the Nexus card, again, this is another thing from expansion 3, where if there are alliances at the end of a Nexus but you're not in one, you draw one of these cards, and if this faction is in the game and you've drawn this card, you can only use the betrayal effect. If you've drawn it and you are that faction, you can only use the cunning effect. And if you're playing a game and this faction is just not in it at all, you can only use the secret ally effect. So for the betrayal, you're preventing them from using either replenishment or raiders, but not both. So it's pretty standard Karama here. It's pick which one you want to stop, and I think that's good. I think that's a pretty decent type of approach for betrayal. A lot of the Nexus cards have a very specific thing that they do. A couple of them give you a choice. In some cases, the specific thing that you are stopping with the other Nexus cards is something that Karama normally can't affect. So, like with the betrayal on the Harkonnen, is that you're basically canceling a traitor, but it has a built-in, what do I do about my revealed traitor? Now everybody knows that Jessica is my traitor, and you're like, well, now you're discarding her, shuffling her back in, and drawing again. So you still get that mystery, but this particular battle you did not get to use it. But here you've got a choice of which one of these effects you want to stop, and you'll have your reasons for doing it. Now, if Mikarrol here is drawn their own, they may steal an additional treachery card with their Raiders advantage. Now that is pretty big, and I like that because these cunning effects, they should be pretty cool, pretty sexy. And finally, with the secret ally, this is usually what it would normally be, and here it is. At the end of any phase, you may send a number of your forces to the tanks and get spice. So it's the same effect, which is what this was meant to be, kind of a one-shot. If I were allied with them, I get to do this. So I'm pretty happy with this as a Nexus card. But what are your thoughts, Mr. Nobody? And feel free to disagree with me, but I'll fight you. No? All right. Sounds like we are in an agreement. Um, Unless you've got a sound issue, because I can't hear you if you're talking. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good Nexus card. I think this is a good faction. So I wish that Gale Force 9 was like as gung ho with more Dune factions as they are with like I don't know, new Star Trek Ascendancy races, or you know decks in Firefly or whatever the case may be. Yeah, I'd love to see a bunch of these, and I love this idea of more factions in the game. So, people who know me know that I love Cosmic Encounter, over like 230 aliens or so, more if you count the ones that we tried to get published. But I think this is a pretty good homebrew faction. One of the best homebrew factions, if I'm being honest, that I have seen ever. So kudos to you, Gary. This is well thought out, very interesting. I can't wait to dig into that source book and see what other kinds of fun things that are in there with which to draw upon. And if they do have, so we have like the Marquis Bartholomew is the head. Is that an actual listed name in there? And basically, who thought this up? That's what I want to know. And are these characters? I look forward to hearing more about. We've got 3 members of the Raider family. And so yeah, what is their deal? Who's related to whom? And how do these people fit in? That's some lore stuff that I would be interested to hear. Um, but yeah, there you have it. I do recognize this silhouette though. That guy has shown up before because I know that because we've play tested with it. Because they just basically grab the stuff off the internet and just use it for playtesting, just so they have something in there. So we may have lost our audio on Mr. Nobody. We'll investigate that further, but we have covered everything here. Let me know in the comments if you've been reading along or had already read this. Let us know what you think of this faction. Let us know how you think you'd say that as a name for the faction. And feel free to chime in on Board Game Geek. I'll put a link to this homebrew faction here in the description for this video. That's it for this episode of Battle Language. Thank you to Mr. Nobody for giving us his thoughts on 90% of what we talked about here. And we look forward to having you join us again in the future. And thanks for everyone who's watching. That's it for this one. We'll see you later.